Theo Pickles is the high-performance strength and conditioning coach for the Netherlands rowing team. You may recognize Theo as he was a guest on the podcast way back at the beginning, episode 30 to be exact. In this interview, Theo and I catch up. We discuss how he has implemented velocity-based training for the Netherlands rowing team and how this allows him to implement autoregulation with these athletes. In addition, we also discuss educational opportunities for strength and conditioning coaches through the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association and how he has fine-tuned the warm-up for his athletes. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast, a podcast focused on scientific and real-world expertise on training strategies between your ears, behind the oar handle, on the field and court, and in the strength and conditioning room. I'm your host, Joe DeLeo. I am a strength and conditioning coach, speaker, and lifelong student focused on continuous improvement. Thank you for joining me, and let's roll to today's episode. Theo, it's fantastic catching up with you. Thanks so much for making time to come back onto the show. It's been a couple years, so looking forward to sitting down and speaking with you and you taking the time to catch everybody up on what you've been up to. So welcome back.
Great, thank you, Joe. It's been it's an absolute pleasure to be back on the show, and I'm really excited about our chat.
Me too. We've got a great episode in store for the listeners. So why don't you just kick things off? The last time our initial interview we did a few years ago was actually right before the Rio Olympics. So it's been 4 years. So we've had a nice chunk of time in between there. So why don't you fill us in on any updates from that first interview of things that you've learned, experiences, changes you've made into the philosophy for strength and conditioning, working with the rowing athletes.
Yeah, I think so. I was relatively new to rowing last time I was talking to you, and so obviously I've learned a lot in that period, made a lot of mistakes, of course, and learned a lot at the same time. So I think one of the big issues for us has been working around our senior athletes and their injury status, and a lot of it is injury management rather than aiming to get them better for curing them forever. It's more a matter of keeping them rowing, particularly those that are in their 30s and older. So I've been relaxing my philosophy on the kind of training they do. So it's a really important aspect of my training now is they come into the gym. First thing I make sure I say to everyone is, how are you? And most of the time they say, I'm great. I say, awesome, let's go, let's hit it hard. But every now and again, you say, oh, the back's a little bit grumpy today, or this or that. I say, okay, well, you've got deadlifts on your program today. What do you think about that? They're like, not so sure. Can I do the trap bar instead? Or can I do front squats instead? Or can I do a leg press? That's fine. And I think now that I've worked with them for a long time, they know all the options that are available to them, and with a little guidance, they're almost choosing things for themselves a little bit. Their program is almost a suggestion for them, and then with a little guidance, they're choosing more what they want to do. And so that gives me a better relationship with them rather than forcing them through their discomfort and and potential injury. With just the most important thing is that the next day they can get into the boat and row hard. So that's been a really important lesson for me. I think that's been the big one. We've also been focusing on hip mobility, ankle mobility, general flexibility around the hips as well. That's been a huge change. I think it's had a lot of impact on the number of injuries we've had in the last couple of seasons. So that's it. I think those are our big changes. We've also introduced velocity-based training as a sort of a primary area, which has been really fantastic. It's a lot of fun. It's very intense, and we're using GymAware in a pretty big way. It's quite cool now to see our gym. There's iPads on every rack, and the girls really get it, or the women really get into it. And we have leaderboards up on the big screen, and they're all trying to compete with each other. So that's really lifted training to another level as well.
Fantastic. That's great. I'm really looking forward to diving deep into VBT with you and talking more in depth about that. But just to circle back on a couple of the things you mentioned. So, in terms of the athletes coming in, so you're taking the time, greet them, make eye contact, get a sense of how they're feeling on that day. And then you're implementing, on the fly, some auto regulation here. Yeah. So making a change into, I have a plan on the piece of paper, of what we may be doing, but not afraid to audible on the day. How did you and the athletes and the coaching staff kind of evolve to that point? Because obviously there's got to be a lot of trust there in communication. So how did you get to that point from, say, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think part of it is just time and building up that relationship over time and really getting to know each individual deeply, the coaches as well, and also giving them the knowledge to help to inform those decisions better as well. So from my point of view, if it's a deadlift, a trap bar deadlift, a leg press, a front squat, a back squat, a low bar squat, a goblet squat, a Bulgarian, I don't care. What I'm interested in is how far off your maximum effort are you, and how many reps are you doing? Are you doing a hypertrophy type session, a strength type session, or a power type session? Outside of that, so all right, we're going to do 5 reps. We're going to work at 90%, and now, what do you want to do? We've got deadlift on your program, but do you want to use a trap bar instead? That's fine by me. Do you want to use a leg press instead? That's fine by me. Whatever your back or your specific issue that you have is most comfortable with. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really key point, in giving the athlete the flexibility to, interchange a different lift on the day, because the fact of the matter is, especially in a high performance environment, to what your point was earlier, especially older athletes, they're usually working around some type of, if it's not an injury, it's definitely like an ache or a niggle or something that's popping up, causing them an issue. And you just have to be smart and manage the load, manage the fatigue. So that's great. That's great.
Yeah. We've got some athletes who have these permanent changes in their program. It's like, this woman is never going to deadlift again. It's a terrible idea, and it blows her back up every time. So we're just not going to do it. Or some of them never do bilateral work, and some of them never do unilateral work because it irritates their back for some reason. So those permanent changes I have on a long-term process, and when I do the programming, I have those 4 or 5 in the group that I remember, and they have their own special programs. But then the rest is, sometimes it's just a temporary change, just for a week or just for a couple of weeks, and then they're back onto the normal program again. So it's, very dynamic kind of atmosphere now.
So really, what we're not only talking about is autoregulation, but also you've individualized all the programs. So they might be working, everybody might be doing on the day a hip hinge, but that might be a barbell, that might be a trap bar deadlift, that might be a single leg, RDL. They're doing some type of hinge patterns, hinge lift, but you're individualizing it to the athlete based on, where they are in terms of development, as well as their injury history and what they need on that day.
That's exactly it. So from the coaches, the primary instruction is make sure they can row tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, they got to
better at rowing. If it makes them worse at rowing, it's a problem.
Yeah. No, and that's the I think, for me too, that's one of the biggest things I've learned is obviously what we do as strength and conditioning coaches is a complement to the sport or any sport. But it's really, really important they're not missing any training time, or they're not too fatigued or too sore to be able to train the following day. So I'll kind of always keeping that, if anything, we're probably making more adjustments to our programs than they would be on the rowing side of things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we're also trying to really encourage the athletes also to talk to the coaches as well. And if they're getting tired or if they're getting sore, not just from strength training, but from their entire training load, which is enormous. They're doing maybe 110 kilometers a week in the boat. So plus their strength training, plus Pilates training 3 times a week, plus their physio, is a major commitment. And there's only so much the body can tolerate, and everyone's ability to tolerate is different. It doesn't make you a bad athlete necessarily, but it's just your recovery times are different from someone else's. So, just making sure that the athlete has the trust in the coach, that he's not deselecting them when they put their hand up and say, I think I need to have an easy session, or I need to be on the bike instead of the ergo today, or can I run a single and do a few less Ks than the rest of my group?
Yeah,
it's really
for sure. No, that's a great point. So not only on the strength and conditioning front, but on the rowing front too, there's this communication of checking in. If we need to audible, so to speak, on the day, just making sure keeping in sight. It's not a bad idea on the short term to make a minor adjustment. Keeping in long term, the athlete's going to be healthy. They're not going to break down and get hurt, and they're going to have better quality training.
Exactly, absolutely. Yeah. And we can take that a little bit further now. We're also, as of this season, we've been doing regular heart rate variability testing once a week as well to have a look at their recovery status. I was actually just talking to one of the women last night, and she was saying, my wrist blew up this week, and just like, oh yeah, okay, it's been a fairly heavy training block. She was on training camp at the time, and it was actually her heart rate variability showed a negative result in their last test, but she didn't listen to it, and now her wrist blew up. Right, so she broke somewhere.
Sure.
In the system. Yeah. So we're really pushing them to say, oh, look, you get this negative result. Coaches, you need to pay attention. I need to pay attention. We all get emailed the results after the test has been done, and we flag one or two. So, oh, there's a couple in the red zone here. We need to take it a little bit easy, like give a stretch and a roll and go home or something, instead of pushing them hard again when their body's not ready for it.
Wow. So definitely using some of the newer technology like heart rate variability, like you said, to keep on a pretty frequent basis, check in on the athlete and see how each individual's adapting to the training plan, to the training load.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So I think the other question I have for you in terms of kind of the last 4 years, one of the things we talked about was we were doing the initial interview. It was in the lead up to Rio. So at that time, you were kind of in a power phase. You were doing 2 power exercises and then 2 strength exercises, a push and a pull. Total session length was about 45 minutes or so. We would do the S&C sessions in the afternoon. Rowing would be in the morning, because as we discussed in that first episode, we found there was some interference if we had it flipped the other way. And you also, I remember, remarked that usually the day after, just the coordination was definitely affected in the boat the day after a training session. So is that those things, has that held up 4 years later? Have you made any changes to that?
That is definitely where we still are. We're looking at that. They still, for the women, they do a training weight sessions are on Mondays and Thursday afternoons. So again, it will be the last thing they do for the day. We like actually now to talk about the stimulus that you go to sleep on.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
So if you have multiple training sessions in a day, those sessions will interfere with each other. So we do an aerobic session, for example, in the morning, then your body takes some time to adapt to it. If you give it, say, 4 or 5 hours, you get a certain level of adaptation. and then you throw a strength session at it. And now what you're actually doing is changing the way your DNA expresses itself. So you were expressing the DNA that will improve your aerobic capabilities. And now suddenly you're throwing strength work at it, and you're, in a way, it's not a thinking system, but you're confusing the system. And now you're expressing your strength, the qualities that will either encourage hypertrophy or power output, changes in pronation angles. So now the system's got two, imagine 50% of one signal and 50% of the other signal, so you get a little bit of both. If we have the last session as the one that we want to emphasize for the day, then you're effectively getting maybe 12 hours of recovery on that last session. So you've asked the DNA to express itself in a certain way, and now that's got now 12 hours for it to express itself and for you to adapt. So we've actually, one of the important changes we've made in combination with that is that sessions on each day mirror each other. So on their strength days, they will be doing either interval work, speed work, or starts as we get closer to the season. So there's some kind of relationship between their strength training days and what they're going to do in the boat. On their aerobic days, they'll have one heavy aerobic day, one light aerobic day, or maybe a lactate session. Yeah. So we're trying to theme the day, so you're giving the body one clear signal as to what it should adapt to.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense.
It's actually very simple, and we figured we want to prioritize the strength sessions because they only do 2 a week, whereas they row every day.
Right.
So if we're only given 2 stimuli a week, we want to make sure that they definitely adapt to that stimuli. If we put it in the morning and then we dull that adaptation just a few hours later, then we won't necessarily see the returns, because aerobic training is such a large component of what they do.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Absolutely. So definitely trying to match the intensities both on the cardiovascular side of things as well as in the S&C room, and minimize that interference effect.
Exactly. So you can think of that either have an energy system day or a strength day.
Yeah. Very good. And then one of the other things that we kind of, as we were prepping for this, you mentioned briefly pennation angles and fascicle length.
Fascicle length.
Length. So could you just go into a little bit more depth about that and discuss like what those are and how it relates to the rowing and the S&C work?
Sure. This is good. This is going to be difficult in the podcast context because I definitely need just to explain it properly, but I will do my best. So the pennation angle is the angle of the muscle fibers. So if we take as an example the rectus femoris, so that is one of the major quadricep muscles running down the front of the leg. If you were to dissect it, what you would see would be a tendon running all the way through the middle. It's called the aponeurosis. So it's sort of a tendinous collagen-like structure that attaches directly to the tendon. And coming out on an angle, left and right, like a sort of arrowhead, you have the muscle fibers. Those muscle fibers are made up of fascicles and eventually individual muscle cells. So the idea is that if you were to look at a bodybuilder's rectus femoris, you would see that the angle of the fibers is quite obtuse. So they are not really in the direction that the muscle is working. The angle is very wide. In an athlete, what you would like to see is the angle of those fibers more in the direction that they're going to pull.
Interesting.
So then we talk about fascicles. So if you can imagine, if you were to look at a muscle under a microscope, you would see a series of dark bands. These are the Z zones. This is where this is part of the contractile properties of the muscle, contractile proteins of the muscle. The longer the space between each of those Z zones gives you more contractile ability, you get more force. So a longer fascicle is a good thing. So we've been playing around this for the last couple of years. And for the first time, at the local university, we had one of our master's students had a new way to scan these muscles in 3 dimensions. And so we were interested to look at how we could look at fascicle length and pronation angle, whether it was optimal, and could we make it better. And that coincided with a lot of reading about the use of eccentric training to lengthen the fascicle length, and also to bring the pronation angle more in line with the line of pull of the muscle. So we did a scan towards sort of just after our hypertrophy phase, and what we saw was a relatively obtuse angle. Actually, we did it right at the beginning of the season. We did it after the hypertrophy phase, so we did 3 scans all up, and we saw that the hypertrophy phase did indeed make the pronation angle broader and shortened our fascicle lengths. So the evidence suggests that there are a few ways to change your fascicle length and your pronation angle. So eccentric training is one option. Some evidence suggests that doing both concentric and eccentric training, i.e. lifting weights, is another way to do it. And also there is evidence that better athletes have, so for example, faster 100-meter sprinters have the sharper pronation angle and longer fascicle lengths. So what we then did through our power phases was start to incorporate a lot of jumping, not plyometric necessarily. So it was more a sort of a squat jump. We're actually getting to touch the ground with their hands. So just be body weight. Was touch the ground with your hand in a deep squat, and then jump as high as you can, and maybe doing 10 repetitions of that in a set. We took that further. We went to a Bulgarian jump squat. So you just picture that in your head for a moment, about how difficult that might have been. And then we even went a little bit further again and went to an aquabag Bulgarian jump squat.
Oh, so an aquabag load on their shoulders?
Load on the shoulders and a water bag at that. So there's a stabilization component. Yes, it's loaded, not very heavy, maybe 10 kilos or so. So it's not massively heavy, but it's when you're doing 10 jumps on one leg, that 10 kilos adds up pretty quickly. And we did indeed see that we made changes to the fascicle length and to the pronation angle in a positive way. And so we're going to be continuing with that through the next power block in a few weeks' time on that.
So two questions. So first one is that transferring to the athletes displaying greater power output or greater speeds in the boat or on the ergometer?
That is difficult to. They get faster during the course of the year, but it's so hard to dial that into one specific, to quantify one specific part of the training that's made the difference, because obviously they do a lot of training, and of course they get aerobically fitter during that time, they get stronger, and so to say that it's definitely that, but the evidence suggests from other sports that it does make a difference. So there have been quite a lot of cross-sectional studies done, looking at sprinters, and sprinters with more optimized pronation angles and fascicle lengths have been shown to be faster than sprinters who do not And that's both in elite sprinters and also in regular populations as well of fit people who have more optimized supination angles tend to be faster.
No,
and can generate.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The other thought that I had, and I wanted to bounce this off of you. So, you're talking about essentially a form of plyometric training with some of the jumping they're doing. But the aqua bag, so that's a resisted jump, or if they did it with a barbell. What about if we had an assisted jump? So on one session or one jump, they're doing something where they're going against resistance, the aqua bag or a barbell loaded up a little bit lighter. And then the other time they're using a band. So that's actually giving them an overspeed effect. So say this athlete needs to sort of develop or work on qualities where we're trying to improve their drive time, how quickly they're able to go from the catch to the release and get those legs to go down quickly. So they're getting that neurological effect. Have you done anything with that?
I have not done that with rowers, partly because I don't have a good place to tie my bands to on the ceiling. But I do have a good spot with my swimmers, and we do indeed do that in their special preparation phase or their specific preparation phase, and that they're doing some band-assisted jumps from their start positions with exactly that idea, that giving them less time to get the force onto the ground. And also other components in swimming, they're doing a gravity-assisted jump when they start. They're jumping from. So when you're swimming, when you start, you're jumping off the blocks downwards into the water. So it's effectively a gravity-assisted jump.
Oh, right. Okay. Because they're going down into the, I see. Okay.
Exactly.
So how do you replicate something like that in the S&C room?
Not very well, because we can't jump downwards anywhere. So we jump vertically, but we band assist them instead.
Okay. So they're getting some of that overspeed effect where you're helping to kind of bring along the muscles and the nervous system to go a little bit faster than it might be capable of at the present time.
So,
nice.
And it's also really nice for the swimmers. It completely unloads them going into competition as well, so they feel really loose and they feel great, and they haven't had a heavy bar on their back, and because that doesn't make them feel very good for a little while afterwards. So them being loose going into competition is really important.
Good. Good. Okay. Very cool. Okay. So the next thing I really looking forward to, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on with pennation angles or fascicle length?
No, I think that's pretty. I think for people listening to this as a method of changing the pennation angle, using the jumping movements, unloaded jumping from a deep position, it seems to be is a really good way to change it. It's very simple to do. It's not complicated to learn.
Very good. Okay. And that's a good point too. It's very simple. Everything you talked about is pretty much something you could implement in just about any gym, type setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I would build them up. I build their strength up to tolerate it. I'd start jumping them a little bit and then slowly progress them eventually to bilateral jumping, and then eventually, to loaded single leg jumping. But I would take my time to go through each step before I went to that most advanced level. Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely. Okay. We've touched on individualization. Let's discuss, before we go to VBT, let's discuss, changes in emphasis on coaching cues to come more into line with what the coaches want in the boat. So I think this is something that you've been, it sounds like, working on with not only the athletes, but also the coaching staff to try to get, I think, some of the things they're trying to emphasize in the rowing stroke to show up in the weight room. And that way they're both kind of mirroring each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's about all of us as coaching staff delivering the same message. And you're partly to get a better learning effect because they keep on hearing the same thing over and over again from us. Also, there are principles that you can learn in the weight room that you can bring over to your rowing technique. And the most important one of those that we talked about with the coaches is the concept of connection. So when you are, for example, pulling the bar up off the floor, that the connection is not about pulling the bar off the floor. It's about pushing down through your feet. And that's the moment you start to push down through your feet, the bar starts moving. So your core is properly engaged, that your glutes are properly engaged, that you have enough tension to take on the load. That you're at the same time, though, we're encouraging them to keep their hands relatively loose, which is also something they need in the boat. It gets difficult as using heavy weight, so we're encouraging them to use straps to lessen the load on their wrists so they can relax their hands a little bit. We're talking a lot also when they're doing their seated rows, for example, or lat pull downs or those kinds of exercises to open the chair, shoulders down and back, the kind of finished positions that we want to see from them in the boat as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're just trying to move closer and closer to emphasizing not the language, one, but two, also the positions and the shapes that the athletes are getting in the rowing stroke.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And just to keep on emphasizing those coaching cues, they hear them in the boat, they hear them in. They keep, every time. Connection with your feet, connection with your hands. Get the way that your core and your feet and your hands all need to work together to deliver power properly. Open the chest, pull not with the arms but with the back. Trying to imagine that their arms have no muscles in them.
Right. Yeah. Hang long arms, hang off the oar handle, suspend the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, you sound exactly like my colleagues.
Very good. Awesome. So I think that kind of the other point to tie into that too. So how has this factored into the periodization? So you mentioned as we were prepping that you've been kind of implementing a newer or maybe a modified periodization strategy with some of the athletes and having some good results from it.
Yeah, so this is something we've been looking at with the men specifically. And so everything I said about the women, where we've got our weight sessions separate from their boat sessions, we're doing it completely differently with the men. And this is being informed by one of our scientists. They've decided to go down this route, which is different. It's definitely not conventional, but it is interesting, and there is evidence to suggest that it works. So we have very short periodization blocks, so either 3 weeks or 2 weeks, whereby on the 3-week blocks, they have an aerobic emphasis. And on the 2-week blocks, and sometimes only 1-week block, they have a strength emphasis. And they just kind of cycle between those two. On the aerobic weeks, they do 3 strength sessions a week, but they're very short. And they do them straight after their heaviest aerobic session. And the theory is that you actually encourage the growth of new mitochondria by doing your strength session directly afterwards. And it's actually a hypertrophy type session, so they're looking at 8 to 12 repetitions, but just for 1 or 2 sets. So we're not seeing much performance from them in the gym. They're not lifting massive weights, but they are apparently stimulating growth of new mitochondria.
Okay, so to recap, so you said so when they're in an aerobic phase, and
Yeah,
this would be for a 2 to 3 week period, they're doing 3 strength sessions a week, 1 to 2 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions.
yeah,
Okay, and so the focus here is a little bit different. So instead of working more towards building strength or power, the real focus is on building the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. So I guess my question or my thought is the thought process behind that to really continue to elevate or push up the capabilities and power of the aerobic system?
that's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. So we then, once we've got through that aerobic block, we have the 2 weeks or 1 week of strength, and that's just to maintain their underlying strength, which is a really strong group. There's, I think, 90% of them have all hit their required strength goals. So it's just a matter of maintaining their strength and trying not to let them get weaker.
Sure.
So and our strength goals are for the men 1.9 times body weight squat and deadlift.
One other question to clarify: when they're doing that aerobic block and they do the strength session, you said they do the rowing first and then the strength, correct?
Yep, straight afterwards.
So it's concurrent. So it's say
Yep.
it's a 45 to 60 minute rowing session or maybe longer, and then they wrap that up, boats on the rack, and then they're heading right to the gym.
Yep, that's
so that
it.
would
Exactly.
that would be a concurrent session.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the most concurrent kind of training you can possibly do, I would say. So,
Sure.
And even using what concurrent training has been such a sort of conundrum for all its sports, where aerobic capacity and strength capacity play an important role. And so this is almost a way to embrace that conundrum and take advantage of it.
Interesting. Now, when they shift to the strength phase for that 2 weeks, so at that time they're probably doing maybe intervals or a little bit more anaerobic work on the rowing side of things. Are the strength and conditioning sessions still concurrent, or is there more space between the rowing and the strength and conditioning session?
Exactly. Then there's more space between them. So then they're doing more like the women do, and they move to a late afternoon session. It's much more intensive. So it'll be lower reps, heavier weights, more sets. So look more like a traditional strength training session for a strength-based athlete.
Interesting. So, how have the results been with that approach so far in terms of just the athletes and just continuing to get better?
I don't know if you've been following our men's double four over the last year or so. They've absolutely blown the competition out of the water. There's no one close to them right now. So I think they won Lucerne and Worlds last year by some lengths.
Very good. Excellent.
So it's been really great. All of our men's boats are now qualified, so that they are qualified in World Championships. So we're certainly in a good place right now.
Excellent. And the athletes' feedback in that training approach, like in terms of just not only how the training's going, but like how their bodies feel and the mindset and stuff. What's been their kind of feedback, I guess, more subjectively here than objectively?
They say it's brutal. They hate it.
Really?
Hate it. They are exhausted. They drag themselves into the gym. It's that those aerobic blocks are really tough. They will do 3 sessions a day, 4 sessions a day, including the strength session. So they'll row in the morning, straight into the gym, on the bike, middle of the day sometime.
Okay.
And then back into the boat or on the ergo in the afternoon again.
Yeah, that's a long day.
And so it's really, they'll probably get into the boat about 8:30 in the morning, and they'll leave the yoga room at about 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, and then they're going dinner and bed.
Exactly, and that's all they're good for.
Oh man. Okay. All right. So is so the aerobic block, even though the overall intensity may be lower in terms of like what they're doing power output wise on the on the ergo or in the boat, as well as the gym is lower, the fatigue levels are actually sounds like pretty high.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of that's due to that there's only 2 to 3 hours of recovery between each session.
Right.
And it's just sort of going all day basically with very little recovery for 3 weeks straight.
And then when they go to more of the traditional kind of block where they have the rowing session in the morning, several hours, and then the weight session, how are they feeling then?
Yeah, then they start to freshen up.
Okay.
So you see, coming towards the end of that week, they're feeling a lot better. They're a lot more chirpy when they come into the gym. There's more smiles. But by the end of the third week from the aerobic block, it's not a happy place to be when you see them coming in. So they're pretty grumpy.
Yeah.
And as they recover again, and that load comes off, even though the intensity is higher in their strength block, they're overall feeling much better.
Right. So it sounds like too, one of the big takeaways for me, with everything you're sharing there is, I think part of the reason that they're doing that 2 to 3 week aerobic block is it's just simply not sustainable, for longer than that. They'll start really breaking down. So you go through that sort of very, small, mesocycle there, and you get in your training for a couple of weeks, and then you have to shift. Otherwise, it's too much.
Absolutely. I think with most elite programs, you see that we generally work on a 4-week block with 3 weeks where we build up the intensity or volume or both, and then an easy week, and then you build up again because you can't sustain that level of work indefinitely. Something has to.
Right. No, that makes sense. I misspoke there. Mesocycle is about a week. A microcycle would be about 3 to 4 weeks. I got my terminology confused there. Okay. That was fantastic. Anything else to kind of add about that before we shift and talk about VBT?
I think that pretty much covers it. I think it's interesting to see 2 very different systems between the men's program and the women's program, but both successful, which is also interesting as well. Which I think is a really important lesson that as you look around different programs, there's no one way to do it. There's no one perfect way, and so long as for me, I think the most important thing is so long as you can keep on doing your sport, you'll be successful at it. It's when you have to take 6 weeks off for an injury, that's when you have a problem.
Yeah, 100%. You got to be able to continue to train to keep moving forward and making progress. Absolutely. So as we go into VBT, 4 years ago, how are you structuring the training loads and the sessions? Was that a traditional percentage 1RM? Was that reps in reserve? Was that RPE? What were you using 4 years ago? And then why did you migrate or evolve to a velocity-based training system?
So right when I first started with rowing, and this is what I've been doing my whole life as a strength conditioning coach, we'd do a strength test every 6 weeks, and then you'd get your percentages based off that, and I'd write them carefully into the program, and then I would be wrong. Because those percentages are worked out on people who are fresh, who have trained a few times a week, who are maybe strength athletes, pure strength athletes, or university students or something like that. And they don't take into consideration the fact that most athletes have maybe already had 1 or 2 training sessions by the time they come to execute these percentages. And you did your test 6 weeks ago, so it has basically no relevance to what's happening today. So I used to do percentages. I realized that wasn't working, so then I started using reps in reserve, and that was better. So now we're getting this more into this auto-regulation sort of concept, and that was good, but a lot of people didn't get it. They're like, I don't understand what the difference is between 3 and 2 reps at a time. I was like, it's not that important, but they wanted more precision than that. So I was like, all right, we need to keep on working on this problem. So what I'm now doing is a combination of all 3. I'm going to go back to talking specifically about the women's program because of the way the men's program is structured and how it clashes with my other programs. My assistant is looking after the men's program. I'm looking after the women's program. So this is how the women's program is now structured. Let's start off with a clarification of what velocity-based training is. So basically, we know that your strength adaptations are specific to the speed at which you train. So if you want to get stronger at being fast, you need to train being fast. If you want to get strong at being classically strong, i.e. lifting lots of weight, you have to lift lots of weight, and as a result, it will be slow. So in a way, as strength and conditioning coaches, we've been using velocity-based training forever. We've been doing unloaded jumps, we've been doing assisted jumps, we've been doing loaded jumps, we've been doing Olympic type lifting, we've been doing very heavy squatting. So we've been exploring the velocity velocity-force relationship for a long time. The new term of velocity-based training has now come around because we're able to quantify that the speed of the bar accurately and relatively cheaply, which before we just said, okay, that looks really heavy and therefore slow, and that looks really light and therefore fast, and that's kind of what it's like. And you try to fit it in with your training objective for that particular block of training. So now that we can quantify the speed that the bar is moving at, we can start to say, okay, I would like you to move in the power zone. So that is going to be a specific speed, and I just want you to move as much weight as possible in this particular zone. So this sounds like it's going to get very complicated. I think so. Let's talk about Bosco's strength continuum.
Okay.
So maybe that's a good one to throw into the show notes.
Yeah. And I can put a visual of the force velocity curve as well so that they see the speeds.
Yeah, exactly. So if we look at Bosco's strength continuum, which I'm just going to pull up my own spreadsheet that I have of it because I've put in all the numbers that correlate to the various speeds. All right. So when we're quantifying velocity, we know some interesting things about it. If we take the back squat, we know that most people, if they do a 1RM and they are well trained, they will be able to move the bar in that 1RM if they're trying as fast as possible at 0.25 meters per second. We also know that the decrement, let's say we now do 5 reps at 87.5%, that's probably going to be a maximal set because your velocity decrement, each repetition is going to be about 0.025 meters per second. So that means we're going to start off at 87.5%, and you would expect the first repetition of your squat to be 0.43 meters per second. The next one should be 0.4, 0.38, 0.35, 0.3, 0.25, plus or minus. So if I want my athlete to train in the absolute strength zone of Bosco's strength continuum, and I want them to do a maximal set of 5 repetitions, I'm going to set them a training zone of 0.3 meters per second to 0.25 meters per second. Now that sounds like it's a very difficult thing to measure. So again, this is really for programs where you have time and money to invest in systems like GymAware. So our athletes actually have an iPad up in front of them. The iPad is linked to a GymAware power tool, which is a linear position transducer attached to the bar. And that displays on the iPad exactly how fast the bar moved each set or each repetition. And the athlete sees that live. So they're instructed to move the bar as fast as possible every repetition. If they move the bar too fast, they need to add some weight. If they move it too slowly, they need to take some weight off. So as an example, we are now just entering into our power conversion phase. And I've asked for next week, they're going to have a relatively light power day. So they need to move the bar between 0.55 meters per second and 0.65 meters per second, which places them in the strength power zone. So now, imagine my athlete comes in and last week they did 80 kilograms in that zone, but the coach cooked them in the morning in the boat, and they come in and they go, all right, I did 80 last week, I'm going to do 80 again this week because it's the same training zone. And then they find that they're actually at 0.48 to 0.58 meters per second. So, okay, you're tired today. I'm going to take some weight off so that you can still achieve the training goal for the day, but we're going to do it with less weight. Or alternatively, you go the other way and say, okay, last week you did 80 in that zone, and today you moved the bar at its fastest or its slowest maybe at 0.6 meters per second and to 0.7 meters per second. So it was faster than the zone that we prescribed. So now you can add some weight. That's awesome. You got stronger. So it's a way for the athlete to really dial in exactly on the training quality that we want to get out of the session at the appropriate weight. Because if you let them just choose the weight randomly, they'll just choose heavy all the time.
Sure. No, that makes a ton of sense. So what I like about this too, and before I ask my question, so also to build off of this, you said you were with the women, you're using a combination. So you're using velocity-based training. So they're seeing the numbers, they're getting feedback on how fast the bar is moving. But you're also doing, I believe, some either RPE or reps in reserve. So are they kind of tracking that, like in terms of subjective feedback of how heavy they felt that set was too?
Yeah, so they're doing that as well. And as things get lighter, they keep on, or as they get more powerful and faster, they think, oh, it feels really light, but it's actually their reps in reserve are the reps in reserve in that zone. So we're doing a variety of things now. We're now doing a predicted 1RM test every week, every Monday. So we have a live moving idea of what their current 1RM is in the squat.
Nice.
We're using that to inform us on weight selection for that week on some exercises. So, for example, their Olympic style lifts. So you should be lifting around this weight in your Olympic lift for the day. And we're using GymAware as well to estimate that for us. we're then using both reps in reserve or RPE for their other exercise, so that they're non-primary lifts. So I actually have written on their program, and I also have written up on a chalkboard in the gym as well. For example, next week is week 10, and it will say on one side it has the RPEs 0 through to 10, and reps in reserve on the other side 0 through to 10. So for next week, there'll be an arrow pointing at 6 for reps in reserve, and that equates to an RPE of 5.
Got it.
So they're doing a little bit of everything. So the things where we're not using the gym wear to measure, because it doesn't make sense to measure everything with the gym wear, they're using that as their guide. Where we want to use the gym wear, we're using the speed zones, and so you have to lift at this speed. And then for, say, their Olympic lifts, where you can use gym wear, but I don't really want to with them, I'm using percentages of their predicted 1RM squat, which has also been worked out for me by the gym wear.
That's great. That's fantastic. So that's just a really beautiful way to execute auto-regulation on the day, to everything you touched on. If they're coming from a rowing session and they're pretty fried, they're exhausted, they have their load that they might be targeting for that first set. We look at the speeds, and boom, from then on out, we're adjusting. They might be going lighter. However, if that athlete's, it's a different response, they're feeling good that day, good. We're going to go with the flow. We'll add a little bit more weight, and we're going to hit that number.
Exactly. And, the other problem with programming from percentages, and this is where, the discussion we had at work a while, I've actually got some of my colleagues still work with percentages, and they like that system. Maybe their athletes are more pure strength than my ones are. You'll do your tests maybe every 6 weeks, and then you're going to try and predict how much better they're going to get every week. So you might say, okay, they're going to get better by 1.5% every week. So we're going to incorporate that into our calculation as to what percentage of that 1RM test they need to lift each week. The problem is, anyone who's been to the gym will know that you don't get linearly better. You have definite good days and definite bad days. And you have this percentage written on your program, and you put it on the bar, and then you can't. Coach is wrong. The system doesn't work, or I'm rubbish, or it gives them either a lack of confidence in themselves, the coach, or the program. So instead of just getting rid of that idea and that set structure of percentages, and you have to have exactly this weight on the bar. So no, just how are you feeling today? Feeling good? Let's go for it. Feeling not great? We'll have to back off a little bit. And the gym wear actually just allows us to quantify that number as well.
Beautiful. So two questions for you. So number one is, or kind of 1 and 1A or 1B, how many years have you been using the VBT system with the athletes now? We've been
with it for 4 years. We've been using gym wear now. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And then the second kind of part to that is, as a result of moving to a VBT approach, have you also seen a reduction in injuries in the athletes because of being able to auto-regulate more effectively?
We've definitely seen a decrease in injuries. Exactly what it's attributed to,
sure,
is again difficult to say. So we've actually put a whole bunch of things in place over the last few years in terms of what they're doing in the boat and the ergos, what we're doing in terms of preparation for rowing as well, in terms of this whole auto-regulation concept, not just in terms of what they're lifting, but also in terms of what they want to do each session. So there's so many different things in place. It's kind of hard to say if it's made a difference. It's definitely been positive from the fact that they are motivated. It's super fun to train with. It's super motivating. So imagine this. You've got, let's say, it doesn't have to be heavy. It's 60 kilogram squat. And the instruction is move that bar as fast as you can. And a little number comes up and tells you how fast you moved it. And say, right, try and move it faster than that. Try and move it faster. So you're trying to beat yourself every repetition, every set. On top of that, you've got a leaderboard in front of you showing you what everyone else lifted, how fast they moved. It's up on the big screen. It's also on the iPad as well. They've got a list of who lifted the same weights that day. And they're trying to beat each other. So it's incredibly motivating. So we're getting more power out of them.
Yeah. And so there's definitely, you've injected a healthy competition and a gamification kind of element to it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it also, they're trying to beat themselves. So the gym aware is showing them what they did on their last set, what their personal best is on that particular weight. It shows them up on the big screen whether that was an improvement equal to or worse than the last time they lifted that weight. It will show them, makes a big deal as well if they get a personal best. It gives them a little cup and a star and stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice. So my second question for you was, when you, I guess, first introduced the Gym Aware and a velocity-based training system, for you and the athletes, like, what was the learning curve like in terms of, it's a new system, so you have a new piece of technology, right? So there's a little bit of, okay, learning how to use it. Once you kind of get over that hump initially of, this is how the training session is going to be set up and how the structure is working. Did this also help with getting more, athlete buy-in and trust?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, we made a bunch of mistakes to start off with. Definitely too enthusiastic to begin with. And we slowly introduced it over the course of about a year, probably, and incorporated more and more into the training. So, for example, a big mistake that I made early on was that it does not work for lifts off the floor.
Can you give us an example for the audience?
So take deadlifts as an example. Using it for a deadlift is not a good idea, because the temptation for the athlete is to jerk the bar off the floor, and they get into their back goes to terrible shape. And so we found that was a bad idea. We found that not using it too much was important. So I make sure I give them a few months each year where they don't use it at all, because sometimes it just suddenly becomes not available. Like sometimes the units have to go in for servicing, or they go on training camp, or I decided to give it to another team who's going on training camp instead. So right, you've got 4 weeks where you're not going to use it. So I don't want them to rely on it entirely. So I've learned that it's a fun tool to have, but if they come completely reliant on it, it also becomes a problem, because eventually there was a period early on where I'd been using it maybe too much, and then they sort of say, I don't know what weight to lift without the Gym Aware. Right. So we've been lifting for years. Right. We've only been using the Gym Aware for a few months, and now you think you can't live without it, but you've been lifting just fine for years. So So it was never a problem up until now. So I realized that, like, I need to ration it.
No, that
a little bit as well.
Sense. Yeah, perfect sense. But that's that's the art part of coaching, right? So you probably had to step back and say, okay, we've got this great piece of technology, but I don't want the athletes to be completely tied to it and reliant on it. So they need to be, educated and self-informed enough to make decisions on their own if they're at a training camp.
Absolutely. And one of the ways I've just started introducing it to begin with was we just did vertical jump testing with it. Okay. So that way it's just once a week, you just come and do a vertical jump, and we'll use that as a sign of readiness. It's a good indication of power, and we'll just start off with that. And then they just know what the gym aware is. And then I sort of slowly teach them how to use it. And I'm now at the point where they just do it themselves. They know how the app works. They know how to connect the power tool itself to the iPad and to the bar and to zero it and all the rest of it. So I just get them all out of my bag, lay them out in the right spot, and they just deal with the rest of it. And it makes my life a lot easier as well. So the session kind of runs itself.
Nice. Very good. So it sounds like it's really resulted in some really fun, productive training sessions. Athletes are able to feel much more involved, like they have probably a little bit more say in their training program in terms of what they're doing, so they can take some ownership. Kind of anything else to add about using the gym aware and velocity based training? Just things that you've learned over the last few years with it.
I think one of the really key things is that it's good only to use with athletes who are already very proficient in the movement that you're going to train. So if you have a young athlete who's just learning how to squat, do not use that kind of feedback with them. Because the temptation is to resort to poor motor patterns to try and cheat the system and to try and get better numbers. So you need to wait until their motor pattern, for example, for their squat, is so deeply ingrained that they can't do it any other way than the correct way. As soon as otherwise start to find little ways to cheat, either on purpose or not on purpose. So that's a really crucial thing for anyone who's maybe just got themselves a push band or whichever system they found. That's a crucial piece of advice, I think.
100%. I actually have been using the push band for about a year and a half now or so. It's probably not as sophisticated as the gym wear system, but for myself and some athletes I use it with in person, it's a good tool. Kind of more minimalistic in nature, but it gives them some of the numbers that we're talking about. But to your point, definitely not something you would use with a novice athlete, especially in the weight room. They need to be able to tick the boxes on all the basics, because it can become a nuisance or a hindrance. They start looking at the numbers and then their technique goes to pot, and you've got to take it out of the session.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And another important thing is, for most movements, use mean velocity rather than peak velocity.
Why is that?
So peak velocity is quite easy to cheat. So you can bounce the bar at the top, for example, or a fast lockout speed, for example, can make it less representative of what's happening in the whole movement. Whereas mean velocity is less open to cheating movements and cheating techniques, because it averages your speed through the whole movement. It gives you a better indication of what's going on, and if an athlete tries to fudge their way through it, it doesn't work very well. So it discourages.
Makes sense. That's great. One final question around velocity-based training that I have for you. It just popped into my mind, and I think this would be kind of pretty interesting. Is obviously we have that force velocity curve. And we're looking at the speeds that you're trying to achieve with the bar to train certain qualities. So we have our absolute or maximal strength, and then we have our power or peak power phase. Have you looked at those numbers in relation to the drive speed that the athlete needs to execute at, say, race cadence at 36 to 40 strokes a minute, and saying, okay, that's that's less than 0.4 of a second. Very, very quick. This is what they need to be able to do for 2,000 meters, something like that. Have you had that conversation with some of the coaches and the athletes?
We actually, in our specific preparation phases, those are the speeds that we dial in on. And so for the for the men, we know that the seat moves at 0.9 meters per second in the 8. For the women's 8, 0.8 meters per second. And then for the smaller boats, progressively smaller than that. So for the women's 4 is about 0.7 meters per second. Once you get down to the doubles, the singles, and the lightweights, it gets. I think the women's single lightweight, you're looking at about 0.5 meters per second on the speed of the seat.
On the speed of the seat. Okay. Okay. That's the speed of the seat.
It ends up being quite a slow movement, in fact.
Yeah. So obviously with the bigger boats like the men's or women's 8 or the quadruple sculls, they're going to have probably faster seat speed.
Yeah.
Compared to, say, your men's or women's single.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the lightweights are going to be slower again than the heavyweights.
Right. Okay. Very cool.
Also, you can think because the lighter the boat, the less momentum it has, the less it continues to run in the water. You have to be effectively exert more strength to overcome that momentum or that loss of momentum that the boat experiences on each stroke. So the men's heavyweight 8, the whole thing weighs over a ton with rowers, boat, and oars all together. So and sits relatively high in the water for most boats. So it runs well between strokes. It doesn't lose very much speed. So you're just kind of ticking it over. Whereas a women's lightweight single scull is almost coming to a stop. Not quite, but is slowing down considerably each time there's cover.
Right. Relative, yeah. So a rowing coach would say, no, that's not right. But relative, when you're talking about the seat speed and the different boat classes, there is a difference in how fast those are moving. So my follow-up question to that, which just popped into my mind, is, do you think the next step would be looking at and identifying potentially how athletes naturally produce those types of power outputs, and then saying this athlete may be better suited towards the 8 versus the single based on their ability to kind of produce peak force or peak speeds in that zone?
That is an excellent idea. And I wish I hadn't. I think that's something really worth exploring. Absolutely.
Cool.
Because everyone's got a different power profile.
Exactly.
So very well, some people maybe are producing their peak power at 45% of or maybe 50% of their 1RM squat, and some people produce at 20%. And that's definitely going to match or have something to do with the qualities of power you can deliver in the boat, those sub-maximal efforts, but as you're running the boat, absolutely. So, that's a really interesting area to think about.
Yeah,
I might explore that with the coaches to see what we think. It might inform team selection into the future. I don't know.
Well, exactly. That was my thought. That's definitely something you and I can talk about more after the interview for sure. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, my friend, we've crushed it. This has been fantastic. Anything else to add at all in the interview? Things you're working on, where folks can reach you and find you on social media or any of that?
I'm not a brilliant social media person. I do have a Twitter handle, Theo Pickles 1, I think it is. But I'm not very interesting, I'm afraid. There's also LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn. That's a good spot. And my email address, I put the work one in there. If anyone's interested to contact me, is theo.pickles@nocnsf.nl.
You may think that episode is over, but we have part 2 coming right up. Theo is going to discuss teaching for the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, and he's going to discuss how he's fine-tuned his warm-up for his rowing athletes. Now, let's get right back to the show. Theo, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association. So just as some background, why don't you talk about how the ASCA relates in terms of the NSCA and it's UK CSA, right?
UK SCA, yeah.
UK SCA.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have that there are 3 organizations in the world that look after the professional qualifications of strength conditioning coaches. So that is in America, the NSCA, the National Strength Conditioning Association, in the UK, the UK SCA, and in Australia, the ASCA. So all 3 organizations talk to each other, and there is, between each organization, there is recognition of prior learning and assistance in fast-tracking you through the various courses to become accredited in the country in which you choose to work. What is special about the ASCA courses is that they are the only courses that are sanctioned by our government. So that means that to work as a strength conditioning coach in Australia, you must, by law, be accredited with the Australian Strength Conditioning Association at a minimum of level 1. They have a really useful, interesting, multi-tiered approach to their accreditation. They start at level 0, which is basically for anyone who's vaguely interested in strength conditioning, maybe would like to help out at their local club as a coach with the under 12s or something like that, and would like to do something but doesn't want to hurt the kids, through to so that they go through level 1, which is more aimed at people who are interested in working at amateur club level, perhaps sports coaches who would like to have some basic grounding, or perhaps first year exercise science students. Then moving to level 2. So I'm a level 2 strength conditioning coach with the ASCA. That is aimed at people who work in the high performance area. So that most level 2 coaches will be working at semi-amateur semi-professional or professional or Olympic level sports. And then finally, there's a level 3 qualification, which is a very small and very elite club of coaches. On the side of that, they also have what's called the Professional Coach Accreditation Scheme. And that basically moves through associate level coach, elite coach, which is what I am, and master coach at the final level. So the Professional Coach Accreditation Scheme requires you to have a certain number of hours of coaching that you're engaged in at different levels, a certain number of hours, and then certain level that you need to be working at. So for the elite coach, you need to be working in professional or Olympic sports. And then the master is finally, once you've accrued a large number of hours or years in the strength conditioning field, and you're a level 3 coach, you can move on to become a master coach. And part of that accreditation process is also a mentoring and menteeing process. So you have to both be throughout, as you move that process, a mentor and a mentee. On top of that, maintaining your knowledge on doping or anti-doping protocols, on your first aid, your professional development points have to be maintained on a yearly basis as well. So it is very in-depth, but well worth doing. So I am also, aside from being a level 2 elite coach, I'm also an approved course leader for the Australian Strength Conditioning Association up to level 2. And we're now, the ASCA has been interested in conducting courses around the world. And with me now in the Netherlands, we're now conducting courses in the Netherlands. So we're doing both a level 1 and a level 2 this year in October. The level 2 is a 4-day course. It's very intensive and takes most people about 6 months to complete all the various projects that you need to do. It starts on the 1st of October and finishes on the 4th of October. So it's a 4-day course. And then we're doing the level 1 on the 10th of October to the 11th of October. So it's a 2-day course. It also takes quite a few months to complete all of the coursework as well by the time you get through. If anyone is interested in signing up, happens to be in Europe around there and is interested in signing up, the best thing they can do is go to strengthandconditioning.org and click on the courses and accreditations tab. And there is all the information you need to apply for courses in terms of the prerequisites. Particularly, some people may think they can skip the level 1 and want to go straight to level 2. There are clear instructions on how to do that. Please do not contact me directly about these courses. All these kinds of decisions are up to the board in Australia, and I just do the teaching of the course, not the deciding on who is going to attend the courses. They are also good value. To give you an idea, the level 1 course is, let's see, international. So the level 1 course will be 475 Australian dollars, and the level 2 will be 1,000 Australian dollars. And with that, you are getting a government-approved course. If you want to work in Australia, you must have a level 1 or level 2 to work in sport in Australia as a strength and conditioning coach. So highly recommended. The course is a lot of fun. They're very practical. We get in the gym, we do some lifting, we get out onto the field, and we do lots of agility and conditioning work, and it's really an excellent experience, as well as a great network as well.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic and very comprehensive. I think it's really, just from our field and the industry standpoint, it's a important point you made early on that the ASCA accreditation, it's the only one recognized by the government of Australia. So for anybody in the audience that may be listening to the podcast, much of the strength and conditioning field is unregulated. So compared to, say, a physiotherapist or physical therapist or athletic trainer who have licensure, we have certifications, but there's no sort of united governing board, so to speak, globally. So we have these respective governing bodies for the US, the UK, and for Australia. But I was unaware until you just had shared with me that this is the only one that's required by is required by the government to be employed in Australia, which I think is a very good thing for our field, because it raises the bar, it raises the standard for our fellow coaches. And hopefully that goes a long way in terms of the growth and development in our field long term, and providing more stability.
Absolutely. And it's another really important thing that they do in Australia. Unfortunately, jurisdiction is only Australia from the point of view of legislation and working with the government. They also work really hard to ensure minimum pay standards for strength and conditioning coaches. It is an industry that has been plagued by interns and organizations and clubs thinking that they can get extremely qualified people to do work for free or for next to nothing. And the Strength Conditioning Association has been working really hard with what's called the Fair Work Ombudsman in Australia to ensure that people are not being taken advantage of and that they're paid fairly for their work that's commensurate with their level of experience and qualifications.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's a great point you bring up because, while we may not be as strength and conditioning coaches, treating or helping in a medical sense or rehabilitation sense, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the body of knowledge and the skill set required to know about the human body and to properly and effectively train an individual. And then coming when you're working in the type of environment that you're in, you need to communicate not only with the rowing coaches, but some individuals probably along a sports medicine continuum, such as a physiotherapist or a doctor. And you have to know the basics, the fundamentals of human anatomy and physiology, and how that's going to be carried over and reflected in that athlete's training program.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally every week, I sit with what we call medical meetings, which is doctors, physiotherapists, massage therapists, and can also include psychologists, nutritionists. And we sit down, we go through every athlete every week. Are there any issues? How are they doing? Is there anything you need to pay attention to? And if you can't hold your own in that conversation, you're going to look very silly. And, again, it's about making sure our industry is qualified and prepared and appropriately educated.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think it's super, super important. Really appreciate you sharing the background information. I'll definitely make sure I include in the show notes a link to the ASCA website as well as the upcoming Level 1 courses so that individuals can find that information if they are so interested.
Oh, fantastic.
Anything else that you want to touch base on in regards to the ASCA? I know the other item not related to that we had mentioned to make sure we cover is the rowing warm up too.
Yeah, that was an important aspect. I think for the ASCA, I think we're all good. I think people just get down to the website, have a look at the resources, the publications, get to know a little bit about the ASCA, and see what a great organization they are and how much they support their members as well. So let's talk about rowing warm-ups. So one of the things that occurs to me in the last couple of years is that the rowers kind of just they get the boat out of the sheds, pop it in the water, jump in, and then they do a bit with their arms, they do a bit with their legs, then two of them row, then the other two row, and then they do that up and down a couple of times, and they think they're warmed up. And so we sort of had this discussion with the coaches. Last year we had a lot of back injuries, and it was really a bit of an issue for us. So we sort of thought about, well, how is this happening? We discussed maybe they weren't getting enough. They didn't have enough room maybe in their hips and their back to make a good reach in a strong and stable position. So they were maybe bending through the lumbar spine to make the length in their stroke that they were required to by the coaches. So we introduced a new warm-up. It takes them about 5 minutes to do, and they're required to do it before every training session. And it's very simple. It's basically just focused on hip mobility, glute activation. So they're sort of basically just rotating the hips in various directions, doing a few glute exercises, some monster walks with a band around their knees. Very simple stuff, very standard stuff. And reports back from the rowers are, I feel much better in the boat. It's easier. I feel stronger. I feel more able to get into the positions that I need to straight away. So it's been a simple 5-minute addition to the training session and a big improvement. But I'll tell you, we had a lot of pushback for the first month or two because I have so much to do. I do so much training. Now I've got to do this extra thing, and it's so much. And so I was talking about, like, what do you think other athletes do? They will spend a solid half an hour warming up in a very non-specific way for their sport before they even pick up a ball or start sprinting. The first thing to do is prepare the body, and just doing a length, doing a couple of Ks, just your arms and then just your legs, and just the two at the front of the boat and just the two at the back of the boat is not really a warm-up. If anything, you're doing something that's more difficult. Pulling a boat with just your arms or with just your legs is actually increasing your load rather than slowly building your load up. So we wanted to address that, and that seems to have been really positive now that they've got into it.
That's excellent.
And they do that before their strength sessions as well. So it's really become an integral part of their training program. Fantastic.
I do something similar with our athletes in Portugal, and the mini band component. That's something I learned. I picked up a lot from working in the Sports Performance and Physical Therapy Center I work in the U.S. and watching just the physios work with some of their patients, and to a person, whether you're just a general population individual or an athlete, there's not a single person that doesn't benefit from having strong hips and strong gluteals. That is the powerhouse joint of the human body. So we need it. It's
the biggest there is. Yeah,
that's right. So we need it to walk around, or we need it to, push ourselves down a 2K course.
Exactly.
Yeah. So great stuff. It's awesome to hear that they're finding success with it, and you've seen them really gravitate towards using it and embracing that in the warm up, as well as it sounds like some of the injuries have gone down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're having one of our best seasons yet in regards to injuries, so that's going really well. Excellent. And we've also got rid of our rib injuries as well, for the most part.
Nice.
And the big change, we made two big changes. One was no more static ergos.
Okay, that's a big change. That's a very big change.
Yeah, and an expensive one as well.
Yeah.
So we shifted. We've bought a lot of RP3s. And when we are using Concept 2s, we've put them on slides.
Okay.
So it seems that the shock of the flywheel changing direction on the Concept 2 puts a lot of stress both through the back and through the ribs, and that's made a big difference in reducing our injuries as well.
Yeah. There's no question that the static, the Concept 2 definitely loads the upper body more than a dynamic rowing machine, but also way more than the rowing shell.
Exactly. And, we wanted to, try and get our ergometer work as close to possible as what's happening in the boat. And to do that, It needs to be dynamic, and there needs to be a non-static ergo such as the RP3.
Fantastic. And so you said there was two. One was the switch to dynamic rowing machines, and then the slides. Was that the two? Okay.
And the other thing was the other one was that we've actually taken the bench pull exercise out completely.
All right. Yeah.
So
that's a tough one. It's steeped in tradition in the sport of rowing.
Exactly. And it was noted as it started disappearing out of the program. I used, where's bench pull? Why aren't we doing bench pull anymore? And so I pulled out a study that came out of Canada. I forget the author now, but basically they showed that the amount of stress on the ribs from lying and then holding a heavy weight, with most of your weight being taken through your rib cage, the leak of that stress was on the side of the ribs, exactly where you expect a rower's rib stress fracture to occur, around around I think number 6 it is, and on the in the middle. And so we've completely removed that. We do a bent over row instead, which I think is a far superior exercise, or a seated row. So the core is engaged. We have better connection. We're now talking about connection again, like we spoke about before with deadlifts, as an example, between the hands and the feet and the core. So it's a better exercise all around from a rowing point of view, and protective against injury as well.
Would you mind sending me that study if you could dig it up?
Yeah, so I'll have a dig around and see if I can dig it up. I don't have it saved on my computer. I don't think. I'll have to have a poke around ResearchGate and see if I can find it.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. The reason I ask is, so I just recently read the research study out of Australia with Dr. Larissa Therese and Kelly Wilkie, and it was on rib stress injuries, and they did a study between 2012 through 2016 of kind of all of the athletes coming through Rowing Australia, and they nailed it down. The most frequently injured rib was number 6. Most of the injuries occur between 5 to 8, but number 6 had the highest frequency.
Yep. Where is that? Same. It's always number 6, 90% of the time. Yeah.
Wow. So incredible. So the reason I think it would be very powerful to take a look at that study you just mentioned. And so you're connecting the dots. This is where the injury is happening on the rowing side. And then we have this classic S&C exercise that's, come through over the last 30, 40 years. And it's stressing that exact part of the body, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'll see if I can dig that paper up. Have a look around to see so I can find it back again.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Anything else to add on the rowing warm-up before we go to the rapid fire?
I'm going to throw in there flexibility maybe as a good point as well. We've been working hard on ankle mobility to make it easier to get a more length in the catch and ensure that the ankles aren't limiting their ability to get into that deep position. And also hamstring flexibility has been another big area that we've been so that as part of their S&C program, straight after they've finished, they'll really have a really good stretch on the Achilles, do some ankle mobility work with bands, and give the hamstrings a good stretch.
Nice. Do you find so obviously we have pretty high strength and flexibility demands in the rowing stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find with the athletes you're working with, do they just need to actually work on flexibility and holding it for 90 seconds to 2 minutes to increase their flexibility through the soft tissue, or is it sometimes there's a lack of strength, and as they develop more strength, they're going to gain a greater range of motion? Or is
it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
So that the injured ones, the mobility, flexibility is a problem, but not the strength. The ones who are newer to our programs, strength in those deep ranges is an issue, and often less so the mobility issue because they're young, because their bodies are still relatively fresh and uninjured, that they can make those deeper positions, but then they're not strong once they're in them as well. Right. So, or stable in them as well. So it's a matter of getting them comfortable in those positions and making sure they can be strong in those positions.
Fantastic. That's great insight. Awesome. Very good. Any specific stretches or anything you recommend athletes do to strengthen? So just for example, like classic lay on your back, a strap stretch, hold for 2 minutes, or do you have them do anything with like maybe a very, very light load, like a barbell RDL to strengthen the posterior chain, that type of thing?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of RDLs anyway in training, so that's and deadlifts as well, and regular deadlifts. So we're looking at after that from that point of view. We're doing a lot of like knee to wall stretches, and then with a band pulling the ankle from the back. They can basically do whichever hamstring stretch they want, but I like them to do it in a seated position reaching for their toes with a straight back, or I like a downward dog.
Yep. Yeah, keep the back straight and get the flexibility through the posterior chain. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, and also trying to extend the hips a little bit as well. So
nice.
Trying to stick the bum out and increase the length between the butt and the heels.
Yeah.
And the other big one we're doing as well, we're doing this quite religiously now, is whichever version they prefer of an Iliopsoas stretch.
Okay.
So that's well reported in the literature as responsible for lower back pain generally, and often in people who spend a lot of time sitting, which we can put rowers in that as well.
Yeah. So definitely make sure they're getting the Iliopsoas stretch, getting that hip flexor opened up. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially as a hip flexor that also attaches onto the spine as well and goes up to quadratus lumborum. It's a really important one, and it seems, again, it's always hard to nail it down to one particular thing, but it seems to have made a difference.
No, I found the same as well. I mean, it's to your point, it's a hip flexor and spinal stabilizer, and one of, if not the only, muscles that goes from the lower body to the upper body and from the front to the back. So
exactly,
pretty unique in that regard.
Exactly.
Very cool. Well, that's fantastic stuff. A lot of good gold nuggets there to take away, and for folks to kind of fold back into their own training. Anything else on the warm up / cool down front before we head to rapid fire?
I mean, that pretty much covers it. I think that's good. I think. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So first question. Let's assume we're all doing the fundamentals the same. So compound movements, warm up, cool down, etc. In your opinion, what's the next frontier for performance impact in rowing strength and conditioning?
That's a good question. I think the most important part going forwards in strength conditioning and within coaching generally is going to be load monitoring. I think rowing particularly is a sport that has come from the philosophy that more is always better. And that is generally not the case, maybe only with a few people, but for the most part, everyone has a maximum tolerance on what they can manage. And that tolerance changes day to day, week to week, year to year. So I think understanding what someone's maximal load is that they can handle at any one time and adjusting the training load appropriately is of absolutely fundamental importance. And I think we will massively decrease injuries if we can get training loads correct and individualized, and being prepared as a coach to say, you're recovered, you can row today, you're not recovered, you're going to do half the distance or you're going to get on the bike. And we're starting to go that way within our programs, but I think as a general rule across rowing programs around the world, we're a long way from doing that well.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a sport traditionally that loves, high volume and thrives on it, and heaping on more and more work for sure.
Exactly. When I first came into the program, I would come into work on Monday afternoon, and I would see my athletes for the first time for the day, and I would say, "Hey, how's it going?" They say, "Oh, fantastic." I say, "Oh, how was your weekend?" They go, "Oh, yeah, on Sunday I went out for a 200K bike ride." I'm like, "Your only day off? Like, what do you think?" And that was like everyone went for either like a really hard run or a massive bike ride on their one day off. So we stopped that. We say, all right, Sunday is your day off. Just go and hang out with your girlfriend, go for a walk, go see a movie, do something for yourself.
Yeah.
And recover.
200K, easy ride, so to speak, for them. Wow. That's,
they're crazy.
Yeah, man. Holy moly. Okay. What do you think rowers or coaches should do differently in terms of, I guess, continuing to develop their approach or philosophy?
Again, I think we need to move away from the philosophy that more is better. I still think in the top programs, we're still doing too much. We're trying to squeeze too much in. If I compare my swimming program to my rowing program, the swimmers do considerably less. They do at least two sessions less a week. So we give them Wednesday afternoon off, and we give them Saturday afternoon off and Sunday off completely. So that's as if I compare that to the rowing program, we are on minimum two sessions a day, 6 days a week.
Oof, yeah, that's definitely different. And I'm actually surprised you said that because swimming also,
they like.
They have it's a pretty high volume sport as well. So that says a lot that rowing is, you're doing at least two sessions. The athletes are doing two sessions more. Wow. Okay, next question. So you've already touched on this briefly. So you said, so the question is, do you have a strength standard / goal or a strength minimum for rowers? And then would this be different at each level? So for example, U19, U23 senior. So I believe you already mentioned the back squat and deadlift is 1.9 for males and females 1.6.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So that's for our senior group. And I know Rowing Australia has set standards. So Rowing Australia uses the same standard as well, and they've also worked that right out down to under 16 level. We don't do that. It's because we don't want them when they're younger to get too focused on the weights. But once they come into our under 23 program, they are aware of the goal that we've set for them and where we say, right, by the time you're getting to your first Olympics, you should be coming into the area of these numbers. It may be on their second Olympics.
Right.
They really hit those numbers. But, and there is, I think, from Rowing Australia, I think it's by under 20, it's maybe, or under 21s, it's maybe 1 times body weight, and then it's 1 point. So it goes up in logical steps up until you get to the senior squad.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. In your opinion, what's the best exercise in the gym to help develop power that transfers to the rowing stroke? So the exercise I've really been getting into for them is a concentric band-resisted squat. Okay.
So we're also using the gym wear as well. So they've got velocity feedback, and they're trying to shift as heavy weight as possible within the velocity zone that's been set. Bands are tied to the squat rack at the bottom and to the bar. They're starting from a standing position at the top of the squat and relaxing down into the bottom. So they're just dumping the bar onto the safety bars, which are set at the correct height for their knee angle. They relax, take the tension off, because in rowing you have to relax during your recovery, and then you've got to bring your tension on from nowhere. It's not like running where you create tension by striking the ground. You come from a relaxed position, you have to create tension out of nothing. There's no pre-tensioning. So they relax, and then their goal is just to drive up as hard as they can. Because it's band resisted, they have to continue to accelerate all the way through the movement, because it's if you do a regular squat, you have to decelerate at the top, but we want to continue to accelerate all the way through the movement. So by putting the bands on, we achieve that as well. So they're trying to drive out as quickly as possible from the bottom. So we're trying to get them jumpy and sharp off the bottom of the stroke, and then to continue to develop that power all the way through to the end.
I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. Did you just think of that up as a bit of a mad S&C scientist yourself there?
Basically, I like the coaches were throwing problems at me, and they were saying we want to be more jumpy off the bottom, and so just having a play around with it, and this is an exercise. I'm using it with my swimmers now as well, although more on their start positions. So this idea of accommodating resistance, not from the point of view of trying to make it more difficult at the top and easier at the bottom, but just so you can accelerate through the whole movement and not have to have that braking component, which is naturally in your nervous system when you're releasing the implement that you're moving.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really love the creativity to try to get some of the qualities of the rowing stroke that you need to develop that athleticism and have that be present in the skill in the lift.
And it really helps for the buy-in from your athlete as well, because you're saying to them, well, this is like, you actually ask them, what do you need to achieve in your stroke? They say this, that, and the other. Go, right, we're going to do it right here. I want you to think about that. I want you to try and make that happen here as hard as you can, but we're going to do it with more weight. Right. So when you come to the boat, it's going to be easier.
That's fantastic. And you know, that's a great point too. I think it's also context and perspective. You know, they may not think of it like a barbell or a deadlift or a squat, but the fact of the matter is you're still moving a very, heavy external resistance. It's a rowing shell plus your body weight plus however many people are in the boat. If it's an 8, you got a coxswain. I mean, that's a lot of, load that you have to overcome.
Absolutely, especially in the starts. The first
say that again. 10, you broke up.
Especially in the starts. The first 10 strokes or so, when the boat is stationary. The men's heavyweight 8 weighing a ton. You've got to get that moving up to top speed. It's there's quite some power, and I think there was a study done a long time ago now that was showing that elite male rowers in the 8 exerted 200 and something kilograms of force on the oar in the first stroke. Yeah, it's no joke. Exactly. So some serious power.
Yes, it is.
And the faster you can power down, the better.
Yeah, that's a great point too. That duality between relaxation and tension, and being able to switch it on and off very quickly. Yes. Yeah. So in your experience so far, what have you seen? And this is probably more subjective than an objective question, but what qualities do the best rowers have in common, and are they trainable?
There is some things are not trainable at all, which is being tall is really helpful, long arms and long legs. So that's pure luck. That's down to your parents, whichever parents you chose. So there's that component. Having a high aerobic capacity. Aerobic capacity accounts for 80% of rowing performance. So that is certainly trainable. Some people are more gifted than others. I expect that no matter how hard I trained, I would not get my VO2 max up to the level that some of our guys do at around 90 mils per kilogram per minute. So 80s to 90s is what we're sort of looking for in our elite groups for the men. I expect that there is a certain genetic gift in me able to achieve those kinds of levels as well. Strength is important. Again, that comes down to the length and the size of your levers. It comes down to how muscular you are genetically, and how everything is trainable, but there's an ultimate ceiling for each individual. And there's certainly a genetic component, and there is a trainable component. And you can certainly make yourself more aerobically fit. You can certainly improve your tolerance to lactic acids, and you can certainly make yourself stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Which brings me to my next question. Is it possible to be too strong for rowing? Is there an optimal range?
A good friend of mine and good coach said to me a while back, one of my favorite quote, which is strength is never a weakness. So, yeah, I've had physios say, "Oh, they're too strong." I said, "Okay, let's imagine we're going to pick up an empty glass of water, an empty glass. Most people are certainly strong enough to crush that glass with their hand. Maybe perhaps it's a wine glass, a fine wine glass. You can crush that with your hand. Yet, you, without any problem, without any thought, can exert exactly the right amount of strength to pick up that wine glass." So what I say to our rowers and our swimmers, or to any athlete, is about strength reserve. Let's say your rowing stroke top speed requires you to exert, let's say, 50 kilograms of force once the boat's up to speed. And that 50 kilograms is 50% of the maximum force available. And you've got to do that, 256 times about to get from one end of the course to the other. So now let's say you're going to move the boat at the same speed, but your strength is now 150 kilograms of force you can exert. Now you're only exerting 33% of your available force. Thus, it has become easier. So you have more strength in reserve. That means you can go faster if you want. You can now move up to that 50% if you require it, or every stroke is easier.
Right.
Meaning you can focus better on your technique. It stops becoming a limiting factor, and you can work on other components instead.
Yeah, fantastic. Good stuff. So this will be a fun question for you. So if you were working with masters, right? So their race distance is 1,000 meters. So in that case, if you were working with that group of athletes, what would you change in terms of how you were doing their strength and conditioning? So we're cutting the distance in half.
So I straight away can say it's more of a power event. So your first 500 meters, which is important in the 2K event, becomes twice as important. So getting your boat off the line and getting a good start and getting in front of the field early, I can anticipate is an important part of masters racing. So that would be one component. However, I'd also be wary with masters rowers that they're probably not in great shape in terms of the number of injuries they've sustained over their rowing career. And so I would also be wary of that. And my primary thing would be to make sure that they can get in the boat and row. So I think they should be strong and powerful, but never at risk to the probably longer injury history that they have.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Do you train all of the rowers the same? Meaning, have you ever given any individualization in terms of, I have an athlete, they're sitting in the stroke seat versus a 6 seat, or a single sculler versus someone in the quad, in terms of a little bit of the different athleticism? So usually some coaches with the philosophy that you put your athlete who has the really good ability to generate rhythm in your stroke seat, and you put your most powerful athlete in the 6 seat, the quote unquote engine room of the boat. Have you ever given any thought to that when you're working with some of the athletes? And
yeah, we've given it a lot of thought, and the athletes ask regularly, and often they talk about the difference between sculling versus sweep rowers, or they talk about small boats versus big boats. And my opinion is generally, whichever position you are on the boat, the stronger and more powerful you are, the better. So there are there are far more similarities in their program than there are differences. And most of the differences come down to individual tolerance on various exercises. Some of them, like I said previously, bilateral exercises cause them problems, or unilateral exercises cause them problems, or leg press, or so it's more of fitting the program to that person from a what makes them feel good point of view. Because at the end of the day, the thing about rowing is, they talk about there are maybe more sprint type rowers and there are more endurance type rowers. But at the end of the day, they're all doing 2Ks, which is not sprinting by any stretch of the imagination. And they're all going to the same events. So we have, within our elite programs, they're all going to go to World Cup 1, 2, and 3, European Championships, and this year they're all going to the Olympics. And if they're not going to the Olympics, then they're having an off-season. So the periodization from their events is the same. They're all doing the same event, which is to row as fast as they can down a 2-kilometer course, and being as strong and as powerful, from my point of view, is the most important thing, plus being extremely fit aerobically and having great rowing skills. If you compare that to my swimmers, we have sprinters, so 50-meter specialists. They just have to do one start and no turns. We have 100-meter specialists. We have 200-meter specialists, 1500s, and open waters who don't even have a start or a turn. So on top of that, some of them are qualified for the Olympics, some are not. They go to different competitions all over the world, so have different periodization for different events. Their individuals' week completely different. Some are in the gym 4 times a week, some are 2, some are 3. So it's a completely different show. That's because the rowers are all going to the same event at the same time, doing basically the same sport.
Wow. Yeah. That was great and awesome insight tying in swimming and just the differences in terms of the different events compared to, in rowing, everybody's going down and executing a 2K race. Very good insight. Final question for you. So given all of your experience and what you know now at this point, what would you do differently if you could go back, say to the last Olympics, like 4 or 5 years ago? What would you do differently?
I think I would have made things easier still. I think I was still hung up on trying to get everyone to do a great clean. I've actually, particularly this season, I've not given up on it, but I'm appreciating that rowers are just not Olympic weightlifters. They're far too tall. Legs are too long. Their arms are too long. So we've tried to come back to basics, looked at the qualities that you need in a clean. So we're using exercises like clean pulls, power shrugs, and then for the bottom half of that, we're using the deadlift. Some of them do good cleans. They want to do them. They like doing them. Great. You can do them. But if you can't, let's just focus on being able to shift some heavy weights. Otherwise, we end up that they're doing cleans at 40 kilograms for the whole year and never getting any improvements just because they've got the wrong body shape for it. So, all right, let's break it down to the simple aspects of the lift and start moving some weight and making some real improvements in terms of strength and power.
Right. Yeah. When in doubt, keep it simple.
Right. Exactly. I'm a big fan of that. Always have been.
Nice. Very good. Well, you're off the rapid fire hot seat, my friend.
Very good. That's intense, isn't it?
It is. Very good. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I'm glad we got to shift gears a little bit and go into all the areas about kind of our strength and conditioning field and the industry. The work you're doing, teaching at the ASCA with those courses throughout the world. And then also some of the insight in terms of the warm up and cool down and the rapid fire questions.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much. It's excellent.
Thank you for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. If this content is important to you, please be sure to rate and review so more people can listen. Also, you may follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook to get weekly free content. For more in-depth content, please subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, leotraining.io. Be sure to check out the resources page to download free, helpful content. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me directly by email at joe@leotraining.io or via Instagram. The handle is @leotraining. Thank you again for listening and have a great day.